We players of the 70s always thought we played in the black hole of Australian rugby, that there's no record that we ever existed. There's no record exists that we actually even played the game, which we don't particularly mind. We hold close our anonymity.
There's no money in the game in those days. You know, we're lucky to get an orange at half time. You know, you get caught having 2 oranges, you got no trouble. You know.
For Australian rugby, I think the 1970s was the Great Awakening. It was the time where we sort of got out of our slumber and decided, well, look, if we're going to compete on the international stage, we've got to do things differently.
The 1970s witnessed some of the most exciting and controversial incidents in Australian rugby union history. There were extraordinary protests, the like of which had never been seen before or since on the football field, and violence that created international headlines. A visiting team acrimoniously walked off, and a bunch of schoolboys played a brand of football that delighted crowds wherever they went. Through a series of demoralising defeats, the Wallabies plunged to their lowest ebb and were regarded as second-rate by the rest of the rugby world. Overseas tours struggled for lack of money, and the game was broke. But a succession of committed players, coaches and officials managed to turn all that around. It was a battle for recognition and respect, and a fight for a place on the world stage.
Wilson goes to the corner. A wonderful try to Australia. A wonderful try. Australia hit the front. Well, the players have been fighting there for 30, 40 seconds.
Richardson holding the pass, delaying it beautifully.
We'll call that one a dead leg.
They're all still standing, you know. This is what rugby's all about.
Fairfax breaking away. Chance for Australia here. Fairfax to halfway.
Tells it all for Australia.
Love of honour by the Australian team. Well, I've never seen this before by the Australian Rugby Union team. They have the better side cup and the whole team there. Australia deserved their victory and did it well.
No chance of the ball coming out that one, I'd say, yes, but Australia's won it. Well heeled. His hip will going himself. He's close the line back to Rosenblum. It's a try.
The 1970s started in triumph when Australia thrashed Scotland on the Sydney Cricket Ground. The emphatic nature of the win pointed to a bright future. Yet the Wallabies had always struggled to compete against countries where rugby was the national sport. In terms of profile and popularity, the game was dwarfed by the other football codes. Because of its amateur nature, many top players either retired early or were lured across to rugby league. It was almost impossible to keep any combinations going from one year to the next. South Africa was one country where rugby was a religion for the white population. When their national team, the Springboks, arrived in Australia in 1971, they were the #1 side in the world. This tour would raise the profile of rugby union in Australia higher than it had ever been before, but for all the wrong reasons. According to the protesters, the all-white Springbok team represented the South African policy of apartheid, a system that discriminated against the black population. Australian players were targeted as well for their involvement in the matches, and the whole tour was conducted in an atmosphere of drama and chaos.
The protests in 1971 did have an impact. I thought it wouldn't, because we thought they'd be protesting about the South Africans.
Every opportunity was taken to disrupt the tour, with demonstrators chanting outside hotels to keep the players awake at night.
The South Africans wouldn't go outside the hotel unless they were dressed in civilian clothes, and they would go down and stand with the demonstrators and barrack with them, you know, go home Springboks. And of course, the tour got on, the Australian players did the same thing. They'd have been quite happy if the Springboks had gone home at that stage.
Myself and a couple of my colleagues went down to the car park at one stage just to genuinely see what it was all about. And we spoke to a couple of people. They didn't know who we were. They didn't know that we were the people upstairs that they were keeping awake before the game. And they were getting paid $5 for being down there. I must say they got more than we did as players.
You had this vision of them being, you know, the rat bag element who just wanted to make trouble. But when you took the time to actually go and talk to some of them, a lot of them weren't like that at all. I remember this girl got to me because she was a very sincere, very committed person. as she was talking about it, she was sort of half crying. You know, I mean, for every ratbag that was protesting and causing trouble, and there were plenty of them, there were also a lot of very serious, very committed, very upstanding people who were determined that they'd make some difference.
Nationally, there was a fair amount of strain, not only between neighbours, but between members of families. I had two sisters. One had a very definite view on it and sort of was opposed to it and demonstrating, and my other sister supported me on it. But I think there was a fair amount of tension across the rugby world in Australia, as well as just in general.
It wasn't only the public who were expressing their views. In 1969, a young Wallaby side had travelled to South Africa for an exhausting 3-month tour. 6 of those players, 5 from the one club, Sydney University, decided against playing the Springboks in 1971 in protest at the apartheid system they'd witnessed firsthand 2 years previously.
There was never any question of their integrity. They made the decision that they wanted to do, and everybody respected that.
My club front row at university, when I went for Australia, was James Roxburgh, loose head, and Paul Darvanese at hooker, and myself at tight head. And it was a strange feeling to go to the test matches and to be playing, and for those two to be standing outside in a just cause, protesting about the very match you're in. So my respect for them meant that I really gave it a lot of thought, but in the end I took the selfish decision that I really wanted to play. I wasn't as committed as they were about the issue.
And good afternoon, welcome to this Rugby International between Australia and South Africa from the Sydney Cricket Ground. The demonstrators here today appear to be spread out, although it's a very big crowd indeed. But won by the Springboks. Fiyun going. Back in field to Dupree, Frick Dupree up towards halfway. Look at him go, the big fellow. And with the support, he got support here, and he gets his pass away. No, Frick Dupree not passing, he's going himself. It's to Fiyun. Fiyun's close to the line, it could be a try. Magnificent try to the Springboks, and the man in the middle was the giant Frick Dupree.
I did a lot of tackling in those days. You had to, the last man at the back. I had enough trouble getting both arms around Frick Dupree's one thigh.
The scrum only 5 yards. Now there's the first smoke bomb coming over the fence, and with this strong westerly breeze, it's blowing right back into the crowd. The smoke bomb was thrown over, and that area there, we see policemen making an arrest, the first arrest of the afternoon.
The ball had come back to me, and I'd caught it.
Take us to it. No, it's over his head.
I raced up the sideline and I hoisted an up and under.
Field for the up and under, yes, bringing all the Australians on side. McGill following through.
I followed through, and as I got there, all of a sudden the Springboks laid off. So I jumped in the air and going forward, and I've just punched the ball back straight to our back row, Bob McLean, and he's gone over and scored.
And the ball bouncing, great chance for Australia here. And through goes McLean. McLean's close to the line. It's a try. McLean has scored. Tasaki angling his kick back, and Fiyun's chasing this one. He seems to be running all right this time. And that's Fiyun getting the ball. Now back to Maria, who came in. There the forwards driving through. There must be a try here. And over the line goes number 7. A great effort to Ellis. And Ellis is over for a try.
The Springboks moved to Queensland for the next stage of the tour, where Premier Joe Bjelke-Petersen had declared a state of emergency. Games were played at the Brisbane Exhibition Ground behind a specially constructed wire fence. The Australian selectors tried some drastic measures of their own for the second test.
Beautiful tackle with Sullivan and hip ball.
In an effort to combat the South African forward pack, Reg Smith was moved to the front row, a position he'd never played before.
It's Australia's loose head, but don't forget Smith is there on this side, unaccustomed to the front row.
It was my plan to put Reg Smith from the second row into the front row. We had to bolster up the muscle in the side.
The Springboks themselves thought it was some sort of ruse. As soon as they saw it selected, they thought, well, there's something going on here. This can't be real.
I think the South Africans, to be fair, that they suspected that there was going to be a blue on.
Yes, number 3, Smith, the front rower.
I can assure you there was no energy there for any blue. It was just total concentration on almost self-preservation, I suppose.
To a certain extent, it worked. in that we didn't muscle up and did play a lot better. Reg Smith may have a different opinion of how he fared in the front row.
I was just so exhausted from the scrummaging that I wasn't able to do, contribute in any much in the sort of line-outs and the rest of the play.
Selectors in those days had the sort of attitude that you had to do something spectacular. If you couldn't win, the secret was to throw people out and throw other people in, which, it works to a point, I suppose, but it was very erratic.
Once again, a South African line out. Here the back line moving. Vasaki coming through. Beautiful play by Vasaki. He goes for the corner. It could be a try. It's over. Magnificent try by Vasaki. Here's the Australian team coming out.
There were more selection surprises for the third test.
The front row. And wearing number 2 is Bob Thompson, the Maori from Western Australia. He's the hooker, and I think, he must be the first Western Australian player ever to go into an Australian team, and caught by the opposing player. There's Lowe breaking away. Lowe, the front row forward. Look at him go. And Lowe back to Ellis. Ellis with Davis after him. Ellis is beautifully fast. He's between the posts. Magnificent try.
Australia had to wait until the dying seconds of this game to score only their second try for the series.
Now, Australia's back line moving. Out to Shaw, out to the wing of Cole. Cole must score. It's a try to Australia. Well, they've finally done it.
One of the greatest South African sides ever, they left Australia undefeated. The fallout from the protests meant the Springboks didn't tour again for another 22 years until the apartheid system was dismantled.
I don't think that in that period there was any great leap forward or progress made in Australian rugby. It was a holding era. We were just battling to hold the ground that we had.
At the end of 1971, Bob Templeton took over as Australian coach for the Wallabies' first ever full tour of France. This was not an easy tour. The accommodation was appalling, and the games were tough, hard, brawling affairs. The players were belted around the country by French selection sides that played dazzling football but often attacked the man, not the ball. By the time the first test rolled around, the Wallabies were given little hope. For a young 19-year-old lining up to make his test debut, it was all part of the excitement of international football.
And you could just tell it was the French. Reeking of garlic, red wine, the smell of red wine, all of them pumped up. I'm keeping my head down and I'm trying to look at my shoes and not get intimidated by the opposition. But
the French had all the ball. They ran all over, tried to do the tricks, the double cutouts, the inside passes.
Play just on the French 25. Here's Barrow, the 5'8", along the back line to Lux, to Trio. That's fullback Villepreux in the movement. Bertrand on the swing. Bertrand cutting back in field. Bertrand going across field. Now, where's his back line? He's linking up with Lux again. Lux has Trio with him. That's Trio, the outside centre. Di Bertrand on the far wing, and Di Bertrand cutting inside players, going down almost to the 25. The forwards are coming in here fast. Sesta's there with Spang Hero. That's Spang Hero going down inside the 25. A great performance by the French team here. They're looking for the quick hill. Here it comes to Barrow, the 5'8". Barrow going through a gap. Out to Lux. Fullback. Yes, Jacques for the fullbacks in. Magnificent play. Bertrand goes for the corner. Great try to France.
They're a very unpredictable side. I mean, they have a wonderful attitude towards the game. They have that that French brilliance, spontaneous brilliance.
it wasn't a rugby match. It was a fight interrupted by a little bit of rugby at certain times.
And a fight here between the forwards. That's Dunworth for Australia. And Irakabal, the Frenchman, Dunworth number one, crosses there too. And there's Irakabal coming in with his boot, and Dunworth throwing punches. Sullivan's there too. A wild melee amongst the forwards. And referee Lewis trying to get on control here.
There was a lot of physical confrontation. They certainly enjoyed biting and kicking and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, they had this little trick where they'd a forward would grab two shoulders of his mates and use them as props, and then start flailing with his feet. And we had David Dunworth in our team who I think felt that was a pretty good tactic and had a bit of a go at it himself.
We responded in the way most Australians would, and after a while, they didn't want to be hurt any more than we did, so we all got on with the game.
Defensively, they had the ball just coming out of their own 20-metre zone. I've flown up on my opposite number.
And it comes to Beiro. Beiro caught by Fairfax to Lestrange.
The best possible shot I could give him. High, just around about the chin area, stiff arm, because that was the order of the day. Everyone was doing it, so I let flow with my best.
To Beiro. Beiro seems to dummy, but Fairfax gets him. He passes it straight.
And you wouldn't believe it. Up popped the ball out of his hand. David Lestrange, the man they call Lizard, was right next to him, popped into his hand, over underneath the post, and that's how simple it was.
Lestrange over between the posts. French team not the same zest in their attack. Now Pabert along the back line to Beiro. A long pass out this side to De Bertrand. But well tackled, down goes Luxon. A violent tackle by Davis, and there's players crashing in here. There's a fight.
Something had happened, and the referee was actually speaking to the captains, and he was talking to Greg Davis.
Now, one of the French backs, Jean-Paul Barrault, had gone down the sideline behind the press bench and come up behind Greg, and it's just a roundhouse punch.
Whack, and spread Greg's nose all over his face. It was badly broken.
Barrow has come in and flattened Davis. Davis, the Australian captain's on the ground. Dunworth throwing punches, and so too is Arakabal. There's a clash of players everywhere. A wild melee. They're all in this. The whole two teams are fighting each other. A great clash here. There's the hooker, Yakvili. Dunworth has been hit from behind.
I've gone off this way, chasing Barrow, and I've come round, I've got up to the back, taken the mouth guard out, and I'm going, and next minute I look, there's 6 white jumpers, and I've gone, not a good idea, this. So I've just curtailed it back.
And the referee just turned the penalty around. I mean, that was it. If that had happened today, that guy would probably not play for a year.
And Johnson's won the scrum against the head. A great chance for Australia. Coming to the back line, there's Cole making the extra man. Cole's through the gap. He has support outside him. Cole goes down to the fullback. A pass to Lestrange, and Lestrange is over his second try. Oh, came off his boot. Well, it's a good kick. It's all the way. Australia in front by 13 points to 11.
In the last 10 minutes, they had something like 12 penalties, and they panicked. They just kept tapping the ball and running, which played into our hands because we just said, cop this again. And next minute, the bell's gone, and we have pulled off the impossible.
Hanging on desperately inside their own 25. Back to fullback McGill, and McGill finding touch. I'd say it's outside the 25. Yes, in touch, and that's the end of the match. And Australia has scored a magnificent win by 13 points to 11 against all the odds.
I just thought, hey, this is Test football. We've won a game. This is what it's like all the time. But some of the senior players, some of the guys like Roy Prosser and Arthur McGill that have been around for some time, you could really see the sparkle in their eye. You could see that this was an achievement that would rank very highly in their careers at a later date.
We went to the after-match function, and Greg was the captain, I was vice-captain, so they said, you're up on the head table. And the Froggies didn't turn up. And they were about an hour and a half, 2 hours late for the official after-match function. And then next minute they arrive, and they all walked in with one arm out of their blazers, about Waterloo. And they walked in singing in single file, singing. And we've just gone, yes.
Across to Barrow, back to Martin.
The French learnt their lesson and kept the ball in tight for the second test. Their bigger forwards took control and they ran out comfortable winners.
It's a try to front.
In hindsight, after such a violent series, it was perhaps unfortunate that France toured Australia the next season.
That's Walter Sponger, almost took that now. Fairfax breaking away. Chance for Australia here, Fairfax to halfway. And his kick is a good one, he's coming through fast, and Australia's still going.
The first test, played on a muddy SCG, will be remembered more for the wild incidents than for the exciting football.
Try.
Yeah, our memories were long, and we knew that we weren't going out there vindictively, but we were prepared for anything that was going to happen. Yeah, there was obviously some ill feeling towards it, you know, on the paddock, on the field, not off the field.
It was a fearsome game, but the French games are always that way. I think they're passionate. It's a great thing to have. They're really passionate people, and I love playing against passionate people.
Russell Fairfax had been poleaxed. They were carrying him off on a stretcher, and then Russell's rolled off the stretcher and run like he was out with the Pixies, and he's run back on to have another go at him.
Well, I've run 15 metres out into the centre or 20 metres out in the centre of the cricket ground, straight over into the mud, nearly drowned.
And he just wanted to fight.
I ended up playing the rest of that game. That night, though, delayed concussion, I remember virtually nothing of the test. Virtually nothing.
Hipwell going himself. Hipwell, close the line. Taylor trying to go to the corner. Try!
Australia led for most of the second half until a typically French movement in the dying seconds robbed them of victory.
Luke's kick is keeping it in play. It's down close to the line. Luke goes for the corner. That could be a try. It's a try. It's 14 all. Well, there might have been a rebound there. He's missed it. So it's 14 points all. 14 points.
In another spiteful match, the test in Brisbane proved to be almost as close on the scoreboard. But in reality, France dominated, scoring 3 tries to 0. Although the Wallabies had performed above expectations during the series, more work needed to be done to achieve consistent results. But the following tour to New Zealand was a catastrophe and a stark reminder of the lack of depth in Australian rugby. Several key players could not afford to spend time away from home and were unavailable for the trip. Then, just days before the team left, disaster. A serious injury to the most critical player.
I remember the day before we were due to leave, we were having a barbecue, and they'd let Johnny Hipwell play in a club game up in Newcastle.
I got caught in a ruck and somebody jumped on me. I dislocated my shoulder, so I missed out on that tour in 72.
Jimmy Webster from the Herald rang me and he says, guess what? He says, you got to get a halfback. Hippie's just gone down. He's out of the whole tour.
And John Hipwell was just, you know, he was in a class of his own, and he was the backbone of the Australian team. So any Australian team in that period without John Hipwell was severely disadvantaged.
Gary Gray played all those test matches in 1972, and I don't think he's ever forgiven me for it, because he was basically run over by the All Black pack and spat out the back.
The Aussies of 72, they were a nice bunch, but they were a pretty average team.
They're walking it.
The Wallabies were seriously outgunned and were easily defeated in the first 2 tests.
Shower, Kirkpatrick.
The guys gave everything they had. It just wasn't enough at the time.
Throughout the tour, the New Zealand press was openly sledging the team.
I seem to remember we had awful Aussies. To me, that said it all. I mean, if you couldn't motivate your team on the strength of one poster like that, well, you know, nothing was going to save them.
The Australians of that period wore those titles, woeful Wallabies, awful Aussies, whatever, pretty consistently through that period. We had something similar in South Africa in '69. Yeah, they're easy cheap lines for home consumption, and yeah, it didn't, you know, it wasn't helpful.
Beautiful ball again. Kirkpatrick spins around. Going short side. Going. Burnett. Back line out here, Burgess. Robertson. Robertson through the gap. Williams.
Remember nothing. The third test I don't want to even remember. Yeah, no, we were fairly convincingly beaten.
Ian Kirkpatrick at the time was just awesome, but the whole All Black pack was.
Oh, I do remember how humiliated we were, and I resolved at that point in time that one day I would come back, or on the Sydney cricket ground or in Australia, and beat this mob to avenge our defeat.
That third test result was Australia's worst ever defeat. There were even calls for the All Blacks to stop playing the Wallabies, as they'd provided little opposition. Standards had fallen so far behind the rest of the world that something drastic had to be done.
There was no driving force that was propelling it into the strength that it later became. Its administration of the day was quite amateurish, and I don't say that in an unkind way, in that was the way it was. But it didn't focus on getting the best sides together, analysing the reasons why matches didn't go well or even did go well, and slowly but surely improving on it.
A report was commissioned into the state of the game. What it found was there was much more that could be done to get the best out of the available talent.
The number of caps that an Australian team had on the field in any one game was not all that great. Players tended to leave or not stick around or go to rugby league or whatever. But whatever the reason, it meant that you didn't have a deep depth. So we set out to provide games as much as we could that would enable players to feel comfortable in an environment where they could give it their best.
What have you done with that ball?
One recommendation involved the establishment of a national coaching director to instruct coaches on how to improve technical skills at all levels of the game.
We felt that many coaches were quite willing all the way down and through the levels but had no assistance of any description. Therefore, we had to provide some ability to enable those coaches to have some basic training.
The report became a blueprint for how the game developed during the 1970s. But before things got better, they got a hell of a lot worse. In 1973, the Wallabies faced the unknown when a team from the tiny Pacific kingdom of Tonga arrived. They were to play their first ever tests against a major rugby nation. From an Australian perspective, there was very little known about their ability.
It's a good team. They try hard because we know the best time to Australia and we know Australia's the best team.
There seemed little doubt the Wallabies would easily win the series. For the first time in a long while, they went into a match as favourites, a situation they revelled in.
And Cole goes running, goes for the corner. A great try to Australia. Cole's in.
Australia won the first test thanks to a brilliant left-footed field goal from Garrick Fay.
There's a very exclusive club of left-footed field goal kickers, and I think it's Zinzan, Brook and myself as forwards.
I was absolutely astounded that Garrick would kick a field goal. We won about 30-3. It was a fairly easy win.
The ball came out to me. I substituted for the 5/8 and dummied to the outside. All the cover defence went streaming past, just much to my amazement. And there was the goalpost, 25 metres out. So, bang.
Now Fay for Australia. Fay drops a goal. And Fay's dropped a field goal. Well, what a fantastic finish. Garrick Fay, the second row with his left foot, has kicked a field goal.
Roger Vanderfield almost swallowed his whistle. So did Norman May, who I think was covering the game. And that was my contribution to the score.
Drop-kicked a field goal. I went off and gave him a mouthful.
And did any of the backs have anything to say to you?
Well, I don't really talk to backs.
Why is that?
Well, they don't have much to contribute. They squander possession, they alienate themselves from forwards, and they don't really train.
If you got the discipline that you require to be playing at international level, the ball should have been tucked under the wing, driven up, because we're attacking the goal line. I mean, we're only 10 yards out.
Tonga to kick off in their second rugby international against Australia here at Ballymore in Brisbane.
Australia had never won a match at Ballymore, but that hoodoo was certain to be broken. Or was it? Within 90 seconds, Sione Murphy scored for Tonga, and the Wallabies were on the back foot.
Tongan ball. Haunga working the blind side, and away goes Haunga. The halfback's a great little player. Here he is back in field to Murphy, and Murphy good score. It's a try to Tonga. Well, there's a great effort. Little halfback. Haunga straight through.
Oh, you can look his face, mate. I think he wasn't over the moon. He got a try. He feel very excited. Yeah.
The back of the line, Haunga again, and Haunga still going. Out here to Latu goes for the corner. Sami Latu it is, and Sami Latu will score. Yes, try to Sami Latu. Tyndall again. Out on this side, McGill's there with Lestrange. Here's McGill. McGill and Cole. Cole for the corner. Should be a try. Try to Australia. Far side to Murphy. And here they come. There's plenty of support here. Murphy's still going. And down to the 22-metre line. Who's onto it? The ball going forward from the tackle to play on. Breakaway value. And here on this side to Isekeli. It's a try. Try to Isekeli.
Coming to the 5 minutes
they knew that the time is going, and we start coming harder and harder and tackling harder. And I think they start to panic.
That day we ran the ball, and the Tongans are particularly good defenders, and they knocked us over out wide, and it doesn't take much to turn a game around in those circumstances.
Lestrange to Stevens. Stevens, well crashed up. That's pull back. Fay winning those lineouts. Big jumping. McGill's coming in. Here's Stegman. Out to McGill on this side. McGill has Cole with him. Cole for the corner. Look at the defenders coming across. There's 3 or 4 of them. And a beautiful tackle by Latu. Fullbacks in. Stegman to Lestrange. Fullback McGill. And McGill flattened. Far side we have Stevens and Sami Latu.
Well, one can only say that if McGill decides never to come back up in the back line again, I wouldn't blame him after that one, because that was an almighty tackle.
Richardson, here's Stegman. Stegman with Stevens. Stevens has Cole with him. Back to Cole, and Cole knocking on. Away they go, the Tongans. This could be a try. It's Tully Balakalu. This could be a great try. Richardson won't get him. It's a try.
Oh, well, I feel over the moon, mate. I feel over the moon. I can't expect it to go. It's a try, because I knew this time is gone. It's finished.
There's the full-time whistle, the full-time bell, and Tonga has beaten Australia. And, of course, Tonga's finest, I should think, international win in their history in rugby union.
I can't say what I feel, because I'm happy. I'm proud of my country.
Tonga, they've defeated Australia by...
Could Australian rugby get any lower? Being thrashed by New Zealand the year before was bad enough, but being beaten by Tonga was heartbreaking.
And, of course, Tonga...
Unbelievable. It was just no one could fathom anything.
Just shocking. It was humiliating.
No one said a word. No one could speak. It was total shock.
We're laughing and we're singing and joking, you know. We're happy that night, yeah.
Still recovering. Still recovering. I mean, it was the worst possible outcome, you know, for me and for the team.
An end-of-season trip to the United Kingdom continued the Wallabies' woes. The commitment was there, but it was clear they lacked the forward skills to be competitive against teams like the Welsh. To make matters worse, at the end of the tour, the biggest draw card in the game was lured across to rugby league.
Rugby league captured the imagination of, Queensland and New South Wales. It was media savvy. Everyone wanted to play. It was tough. It was the real challenge, and I wanted to see what I was like up against the Arthur Beetsons, the Ron Coots, the Bob Fultons, and it wasn't the money. It certainly wasn't the money, because there was no money in those days.
When Wallaby captain Peter Sullivan also made the switch to rugby league, it highlighted the pettiness of some in the rugby community.
I guess I didn't get a lot of support from the rugby. Not that I expected that. It was an amateur era, but one would have thought that perhaps as a current player and maybe as the captain you might have got a little bit more support. And I decided to change the league. I got a lot of criticism. They took my photograph down in the Gordon Club and took it off the wall. So I haven't been back into the Gordon Club actually since then.
The turning point probably came during a series against the All Blacks some months later. Australia was given no hope of even getting close on the scoreboard.
Grant Batty's a good mate of mine, and I could ask him socially, what did you guys actually think of the Wallabies prior to coming to on that tour? And he said, we didn't think anything of you. And I mean, that was just the reality of the day, that, Australia weren't thought of as a very good rugby nation.
But there were some new players in the Australian team with an attitude that showed a genuine lack of respect for All Black reputations.
Ray Price is a fairly single-minded person. He had no idea of pain, fear or intimidation whatsoever. He was fairly open, raw-boned sort of a guy that played every game as if it was his last.
He was aggressive and he was confident, and he gave no truck to the quality of the opposition. He didn't care who they were, didn't care what they'd done. He was there to compete. As far as he was concerned, he was as good as any of them.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm playing a team of nobodies because we've got 15, they've got 15, so reputations are there to be taken from people. So as far as I'm concerned, I played against 15 New Zealand blokes.
A fierce storm lashed the east coast of Australia the night before the first test. The rain continued the next day, making conditions almost unplayable.
I guarantee you that instead of the rain falling down like that, it was dead set going. But it was great. I didn't care. It didn't make any difference to me because it was my first test.
Pelting rain, bitterly cold, and we're out there to sort of play my first test match.
The first test of the 1974 series underway in soggy conditions at the Sydney Cricket Ground. New Zealand are playing out of the mud into the water. Australia out of the water into the mud. That's the two halves of the field, the Sydney Cricket Ground, for today's test.
I remember having a blue with a bloke called Grant Batty. He was the smallest bloke in the side, so he was a good fella to pick. I think we threw a couple of punches at each other. And I heard this noise and I looked around and 6 of the All Blacks were coming over to take my head off, and I just ducked in time, and thank God the ref was close by and he blew it up. I didn't throw another punch that day. I was very happy with the ref. I think I bought him a beer after the game. Yeah.
Paul McLean was having a shot for gold, and I used to chase anything down anyway. That was just sort of, I was built like a lean greyhound.
It looks simple for Paul McLean, but you can see the problems he has kicking into the wind, and there's Price diving on the ball, and Price has scored for Australia.
Just dived on the ball, over the line, try. Right in front of my family. You know, you couldn't have written a page in your book to come out any better. So, yeah, I was very satisfied with my first test.
The All Blacks were surprised by the tenacity of the Australian forwards and resorted to familiar tactics to gain an advantage.
Those All Black forwards arrive. And here's Chris Patrick felling Lambie with a punch there. Kicked away up to the halfway by Price. Gemmell. Duncan Robertson. Look at this man run. Duncan Robertson setting up Brian Williams. He's going on his own, and that is a great try. New Zealand looking for the ball. Here's Kirkpatrick, and Ian Kirkpatrick has scored the try that will win the test for the All Blacks.
Both teams had played themselves to a standstill in the atrocious conditions. The second test at Ballymore, on a dry ground, would give a much better indication of the differences between the two sides.
And here's the Australian team coming out.
But for a dubious refereeing decision and a few missed chances, this game may have been the one people still talk about.
Hipwell working the far side. There's Cole, has support there to Shaw. Shaw goes for the corner, and Shaw could be in. Try. No, penalty. Penalty. The referee has ruled that he was tackled and must release the ball, so it's a penalty against Australia.
Hippie ducked the blind side. I followed him through. Joe Curran was basically on the line. I think I was more intent on taking his head off and doing a bit of damage to him as I came into him and sort of hit him and went over the top. And I bounced, and in those days you weren't allowed to play the ball. That was soon immediately hit the ground, you had to release the ball. Bob Burnett pulled me for failure to release the ball, or what they call in league a double movement. So I think you could have been a bit lenient being a hometown referee.
We had our own referee and he disallowed a try. I thought, I won't tell you what I said, but it was just one of those things.
Blind side to Cole, and Cole's kick rebound could be a try. Great chance. Robertson can't take it, or who's there? It's on the line. Leslie scored.
Just after half-time, New Zealand scored a lucky try, and it looked like a familiar story for the Wallabies.
Other times when Australian got behind, you know, it's easy to accept. Well, I just don't think we accepted the 16-6 scoreline. You know, we all, every one of us on the field thought, well, hang on, No, we're better than this.
Australia winning this one. Lambie, fed by Graham. Paul McLean. Here's Cole joining in to Shaw to Owen Stevens at halfway. Owen Stevens coming off his left foot there and beating Joe Karam. Kirkpatrick has the tackle. This is Cole. Lambie running on. No, it's Price over the 25-metre line. A great surge by Australia. Laying the ball back for Lambie to feed. Nobody. It's gone loose. Here's Jeff Shaw. Out to McLean. Lestrange. Cole. He has Monaghan in support. Kellison's tackle is safe, and running onto the ball is Hipwell. And that is as good a try as you'll ever see from John Hipwell, the Australian captain. Gimmel. Bruce Robertson. Duncan Robertson. Ian Kirkpatrick. Still in New Zealand territory by 15 metres. Hipwell winning it for Australia. McLean running onto his pass to Shaw, to John Cole. McLaughlin has the tackle. Good backing up and support play by Paul McLean. He's coming into the 25, and New Zealand are in big trouble. Laurie Monaghan diving, and Monaghan has scored a try. 16-all.
We scored late in the day, 2 minutes to go, and I had a shot at conversion from a not dissimilar position where I'd kicked the previous one. Probably rushed it a bit.
Because if he can land this kick, Australia will go ahead by 18 to 16.
That's not there.
Just slided past.
We had a couple of chances to score points, but I suppose at that particular stage in the game, we'd lost a reasonable number of tests, and it's always difficult to try and find the right way of winning a game eventually when it presents itself.
Australia's revival was short-lived, and New Zealand ran out easy winners in the third test. Although another series had been lost, there was more than a glimmer of hope to build on. At the end of 1974, a new face was appointed national coach. Dave Brockhoff had an agenda of producing a strong, aggressive forward pack to deliver good, clean ball to the backs. It paid dividends straight away.
We were coming second. We were too soft. We didn't have any idea of what was wanted up front to win our possession, whether it be a scrum or a line-out or the kick-offs to us.
And his motto was we're the step forward Wallabies. We're not going to take a backward step.
We weren't to take a backward step. If we are to be competitive, we've got to draw a line in the sand.
Let's make a statement. Let's be forthright in what we do, everything we do. Let's be positive in everything we do.
We used the word step forward, which meant go forward with body height, which is going to mean we're going to get some continuous good ball, good possession, which the backs can use.
The English team that toured Australia in 1975 suffered the full force of this step-forward approach.
Over history, people have a belief that Wallabies have a dislike of playing New Zealand, always want to beat them. We hate England more than we hate the All Blacks.
When it came to playing England, there was certainly this great desire not to just be easy beats. The players felt that way. The coach certainly felt that way, and I think our supporters did too.
And I think we'd gotten to a stage where enough was enough. We didn't quite have the bulk that we needed, and I suppose that was offset by a bit of fire in the belly.
And here at the Sydney Cricket Ground, a very big crowd, and there's the kick-off by England. England kicking off against Australia, and one change in the advertised teams for England.
We did have a great forward pack. Like, if you had to go out and have a street brawl, you would have picked half the pack to go with you.
Now Neary has the ball for England. And it's a penalty, England. Penalty. A lash of players in the forwards there. And Shaw was involved, the Queensland player, and they're all in it now.
We weren't just going to take the crap that Australia has been taken, be used as doormats or whatever. If it happens, it happens. If it's one in, it's all in. Start it, finish it, get back on with the rugby.
Australia's ball against the head, working the far side to right, going through tackles to Osborne on the wing. And hip ball back in field to Lone. Lone's there. Try to Australia.
I remember, you know, the 2 drop goals in the second half, firstly by myself and then by Bob Brown, which his was a long way out.
Australia's ball against the head. Here's right, a drop at goal. It's a good drop, it's there! And Brown's drop at goal is a beauty! A beauty! Magnificent kick!
It was a great victory, a very memorable win to win on the Sydney Cricket Ground in front of our home crowd against England. Yeah, we were very chuffed.
It was a little bit unexpected, and it was an exciting time.
They played very well that day. Although it wasn't a very big score, I thought they were much better than us on the first test on the Sydney Cricket Ground. But the score wasn't so great, you know.
In between that match and the match in Brisbane the following fortnight or week, I can't really remember. Step Forward came really on because I could see then we had never won a test match at Ballymore, ever, and we hadn't won a series for many years, I think 16 or 17 years, and the pressure really won.
Brock had, in the change rooms, had given one of his great inspirational speeches before we went out.
I can't remember the exact words. Brock's rugby speak was sometimes difficult to follow. There was no doubting the enthusiasm behind the words, and there was no doubting the intent behind the words.
I really went for the throat with the motivation, and possibly was guilty of really giving all.
A lot of people think Brock might have gone over the top with some of that aggressive stuff, but you know, we were the ones that were going out there and playing the game.
The Battle of Ballymore just erupted. It wasn't something that was planned. The plan was that we weren't going to take a backward step. We weren't going to cop anything off them.
There's been a couple of books written about that second test, and despite the fact that I was in the grandstand watching it, I was one of the culprits on the field.
This game started, and it was an enormous explosion of enthusiasm and physical violence.
And the Australian forwards driving into that first ruck. And McDougall for Australia, very fierce in that ruck. And there's a violent. Here's Hipple, the blind side. And the winger Osborne over the quarter line. Hipple again, but in touch. And that was a violent start by Australia. It was McDougall, the prop forward, #1 for Australia, who was really fiery in that ruck.
The ball was on the ground, and I must admit I was laying the boot into the ball, but when you looked at the cameras, and these cameras do tell lies, and it looked like I was laying the boot into the pommy prop that was laying on the ball, and yeah, it did look fairly aggressive.
Going to the line out, I said to Stuart McDougall, right, when you get here, you are going to have it.
I think Mickey Burton said something about convicts, and then we had a line out.
And he never took any notice, but when he got to the line out, he looked back and he said, right, boys, Burton's got the biff on.
As soon as the one punch was thrown, the forward, our Wallaby pack just blew up, you know, and we hoed into it.
Today for England to put the ball into the line out, pull on the hooker. And a penalty here. Let's see what happens. A clash of players straight away. McDougall was involved. I think McDougall first of all, and all sets of forwards here. Well, I don't think anybody... And there's a McDougall again for #3 against him is Mike Burton.
Every Australian forward whacked an English forward. They all fell on the floor, except him and McDougall, who was still there. You know, I did land the punch I promised.
Both captains, no doubt, will be called out here. I think they must put a stop to this in the first 30 or 40 seconds of the game.
He said, you're #3, come here, kid. Listen, mate. And I said, right, there's going to be a penalty. Any more of that and you're out of it, mate, right? And he was quite direct and Aussie in his style, you know. In England, they say, listen, we can well manage without you if you do that again. So it's a different sort of style of refereeing. But he left you in no doubt, you know.
We got the penalty and then the 25 dropout occurred.
I said, right, mate, boys, we ain't going to have any more of this. We've got to let them have it now. Otherwise, we're going to be beaten up all the game.
The violence really burst on those two Maoris. Short drop out by Old. Priest coming through. Up here to halfway to Osborne.
Poor old Johnny Osborne happened to be the bloke to take the ball, and Mickey Burton, he looked like a winger himself. He just took off and laid this bloke out.
But I'd gone a long way. I didn't want to waste all that breath. So I took off. As he kicked the ball, sort of he was standing on one foot, as you do when you've kicked a ball, and he was sort of looking at his handiwork going up over to the touchline, and I jumped over the top and caught him on the jaw with an elbow and put him down. And you know, the referee had judged that was late.
Osmond to the far side, and he was knocked badly down that time, hit very hard. And the penalty here, and he's off the field. Number 3 for England's been sent off. Burton has been sent off.
I didn't kick a head or anything, you know, or gouge an eye or do something that's completely unacceptable. It was a good, honest, late tackle, and I got there as quick as I could, sort of thing, you know.
Here's Osborne, or Burton rather, leaving the field, sent off. He's only lasted about 4 minutes on the field.
In 150 years of that great tradition of English gentlemen that have played the game, I was the chap that was the first to be sent off. I walked into the dressing room and it was surreal. I felt it was an injustice, so I wasn't very, very ashamed, but there was an underlying unease that I had let myself and my team down.
What a sensational start, an incredible start.
I met everybody else afterwards, including the ref, and shook hands, but I never met Doug Osborne again. So it's something I've still got to do before the maker calls. I must see him and see if he's okay.
But no one sort of was injured. It was mostly all, you know, throwing a punch here and there, and I think we've all thrown plenty on the football paddock, but never hurt anyone. It was one of those. But it looked good on the cameras, yeah.
That had the effect, in fact, of generating England, motivating England even more, and we, in fact, were behind at half-time in that match.
That's Ripley, now Rollett. Rollett taken by Wright, back in field to Utley. Crossfield now, they're going well. This is good play by Nelms to Priest. Priest has the winger in support, Squires for the corner, and Squires is in. Beautiful try to England. And England's going right down under the posts.
I remember through the game worrying what I'm going to say at half-time. The president of the Australian Rugby Board sent me up a note.
I think it was something about call your dogs off and don't bring our game into disrepute.
But by that stage, the damage had been done, and we were on the ascendancy.
You know, over the 80 minutes, the fact that they were one man down just wore them down, and we were able to get in front after half-time and hang on and win the match.
Now to Wright, reverse pass to Weatherston. Weatherston's going himself. Weatherston's very close. And on the line, man's over. Is he? No, right on the line again. This Fay scored for Australia. To Wright, and Wright moving here with Monaghan. Here goes Monaghan up towards halfway. Ripley's coming across. Monaghan's kick is keeping the ball in play. And Rollett underneath it. Now, short, Price to Wright. Wright's going to the corner. Wright himself, a beautiful pass to Shaw. And now he's short close to Shaw again, the other Shaw. And the pass back to Monaghan. Monaghan over the line. Magnificent try. Magnificent try. And Australia, for the first time since 1965, has defeated a major rugby-playing country in Australia.
It was pretty emotional, and winning the first time we've beaten England in a Test series at home, and the first win at Ballymore.
When we won that day, it was the biggest winning score by a Wallaby side up to that time, and it was a great feeling, to come off the paddock after, doing them.
The series defeat of England was the impetus Australian rugby had been searching for years.
Unlike previous contests in which Australia was involved, suddenly we were the aggressors. We sort of started it. We were the ones who stood up and said, look, hang on, we're going to show you guys. We'd been very reactive. France had turned on, some very rough stuff in 71, 72, and we reacted to it. But this time, we were the aggressor. We were in there saying, look, we're the confident ones here. We're going to show you blokes. And I think, it was not a comfortable way to do it, perhaps, and there was certainly some pretty untoward stuff happened. But when you look at it in the broad scene, it changed much of the nature of Australian rugby, and it gave us that sort of competitive, confident edge that we've pretty much maintained ever since.
Buoyed by their success at home, the Wallabies headed off to the UK and Ireland, confident they had finally turned the corner and were on the ascendancy. With test matches against England, Scotland, Ireland and Wales, it was the perfect opportunity to gain respect in the birthplace of rugby. By the end of the tour, they would know where they stood on the world stage.